The McCafferty family is having a reunion here in beautiful St. Augustine, Florida. And with us are Dennis McCafferty and his baby sister, Kitty McCafferty, McCombs. And Kitty actually set up this whole thing in beautiful St. Augustine. And they're going to talk about their father, Paul, and their mother, Betty. Let's start with you, Kitty.
My mother moved here to Florida 25 years ago, and I think she made a good choice. But my mother often told me about first getting married to my father and moving into the Kirby house and all the strong women that lived there. She was impressed with her mother-in-law, Lottie, and her daughter Muriel, and she had sister-in-laws Winnie and Wilma, and who else lived there?
Rowena?
Rowena. She learned a lot. My mother was a very independent woman after my father died, and I think she took a lot from her mother-in-law. I think she learned a lot.
It sounds like it. So Dennis, do you know the story of how Betty and Paul met?
Well, as I understand it, my mother, living in Windsor, was very much interested in becoming a U.S. citizen because Detroit was the place where things were happening, especially right after World War II. There were lots of single men. The GIs hadn't quite all come home yet, and she just loved to, whenever she could, go over to the city of Detroit and go to the dances and to the nightclubs, even though she was only 19 at the time.
17.
17 at the time. 17 at the time. Yeah, she would, like my sister, she also matured rather early and could slip into the nightclubs at a ridiculously young age. She met my father at one of those establishments. They hit it off reasonably well, although my father was, I think he had committed to be a bachelor. Of the 5 children, he was of Arthur and Lottie, he was the middle one. And everyone in the family thought that he was going to stick around and take care of Mom. He lived with his mother, and Grandma Lottie owned up several homes in which she converted the homes into
He was the handyman.
Yeah, yeah. She converted several of the homes during the housing shortage during the war and after the war to efficiency apartments, and my father was the person she depended upon to remodel the homes into efficiency apartments.
Put in bathrooms.
Yeah.
He was good at putting bathrooms in.
Yes.
That's a handy thing to be able to do. Yeah.
Putting in bathrooms and efficiency kitchens and those kinds of things. And he was almost 30 when he met my mother and they finally got married. So I imagine the rest of the family was sort of disappointed that he wasn't going to stick around and take care of Grandma for the rest of her life. He had to start a family of his own.
Well, among the stories I've heard about your dad, Paul, is that he really was a man of more than one personality. Can you talk about that a bit?
I think they call it bipolar. But he was always a fun person. I actually liked him better when he was in his manic phase. I didn't actually like him better, but I enjoyed that part too. He was an extrovert, he talked, he joked, and the depressive part actually was scary because he would be quiet and he'd be worried about things that... Actually, I always say that I am not a worrier because I saw what it did to my dad, and I don't worry about anything. So he gave me that. He gave me that.
It's a good thing to have.
I think that whenever I start to worry about like hurricanes and something, I think, I'm not going to waste my time worrying. You know, and I learned that from him. But I think that if he had had better resources for medication, it would have been a different story. It was actually tragic. Yeah. That if he had today's medication, he would have been a different person. But the people that he worked with loved him. His family loved him. He was a good father. He always worked. He always, he's a good father and a good husband. And, a little bit of medication, he'd have been great.
My memories of my father was, again, he had those 2 personalities, but I really enjoyed this opportunity to get together with cousins because they knew him before we came along.
Yeah, that was fun.
Because as I said, he was 29 when I was born, and so there was this first part of his life. And as the other cousins have told us, who are older than us, they grew up with Paul. They all went by a first name basis. They didn't call him Uncle Paul. It was Paul. Shirley really enjoyed my father. She was able to come along with him on a lot of his work assignments. She was his helper. She would hand him his tools, and he always had time for her and was very patient with her. She enjoyed going to his little bedroom apartment because they had a pump organ in there, but he also had this chest on his dresser. And she would ask her,
Wooden chest
on the dresser. She would ask her Uncle Paul, she says, "Uncle Paul, what's in this chest?" And it was filled with pictures. And he would say, "This is my hope chest." She says, "Well, why do you call it your hope chest, Uncle Paul?" He says, "It's pictures of all the women that I have dated that I hope to never meet again."
Shirley told that story?
Yeah, Shirley told that story. Up until I heard that story, I never knew what a fun guy he used to be.
He was a deep thinker. He read about a lot of things that you'd think, wow, and he grasped things that I didn't understand. You remember that? Remember the Rosicrucians?
Yes. And this is from a fellow who was sort of common of the
Sixth grade education.
Yeah, he didn't get out beyond the 6th grade.
Now, he passed that love of reading on to you, didn't he, Kitty?
That's right. I do. I read 50 books a year. Paul liked to read. He liked to read about the Rosicrucians. That's not the only thing I remember him.
Yeah, right.
Oh, and Charity of the Gods.
Okay.
Charity. He liked that.
What did he look like?
Looked like Dennis.
As we look around at the cousins, I think he looks a little bit like Ronnie too.
Oh, he does look like Ronnie.
Does he?
Yeah.
Yes. Our cousin Ronnie. He looks a lot like cousin Ronnie.
I think you're right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I notice strong family genes, so it's interesting to hear that. It's great hearing about Paul. And just a word or two about Betty.
My mother was interesting. She got married at 18, and my father always had my grandmother made decisions for him, took his money, gave him what he needed, and my mother at 18 had to be the strong one, and she was up for it. She, at a young age, a teenager, as a minor, she was up to figuring out what the bills are. We're going to have this baby, and then we're going to do this, and then she made the decision. He was fine with that. In fact, she was the part that he needed. She was the strong woman that my grandmother was, but what always impressed me was she did it at 18, where at 18 I was not capable of a proper decision.
Okay. As I recall quite well. One of the great stories about my mother, she loved to tell this. In fact, I told it at her wake. When she was 17 or 18, again, as I mentioned earlier, she developed early as a young woman. She went horseback riding. And during the horseback, as they were coming back towards the barn, she lost control of the horse. It went running downhill. And the running of the horse, her bra straps broke. And she proceeded to give herself, as she flopped up and down, gave herself a bloody nose. And that was her story, and she was sticking to it.
It's a strange one. But there are so many more stories. We have to go back into the bar and have a drink and tell more. Thank you both very much for talking with us.
Thank you, Dave.